The Research Left Behind with Professor Ashley.
Hello, and welcome to The Research Left Behind, the only Twitch stream, YouTube show, and podcast, depending on your mode of access, which sweeps the cutting room floor to bring you the research that got left behind. My name is Professor Ashley, and yes, I am a real professor who teaches people how to make video games over at NYU. Tonight, I am joined by Dr. Marcus Carter to talk about the research left behind his and Ben Eggleston, their book, Twinsing! We have the same book. Isn't that funny? For their book, Fantasies of Virtual Reality. Easily distracted. Apologies. If you're watching the stream, you can type !book into chat, and you can go and download your very own free copy because MIT Press has made this book open access. Yay! We love open access. All the librarians in chat. Shout out for open access books. If you're watching after the fact, you can go ahead and check the episode description for that link where you can get your own PDF virtual copy of Fantasies of Virtual Reality. Faculty, staff, and students, please join me in saying thank you to Dr. Marcus Carter for being on the show and telling us all about the research he had to leave behind in Fantasies of Virtual Reality. Yay!
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the program. I'm so excited. This book was phenomenal. I'm so thrilled. I like to kill trees, I guess, because I bought a physical copy, which I really enjoy because I like to annotate and I like to highlight things. And I like to think at some point, you know, whoever else reads this will be like, what an unhinged human being. But, you know, helps me understand things. Congratulations. I mean, first, before we get started on anything, congratulations on getting a book out there. As chat knows, a lot of academics in chat, it is really kind of a miracle. Every time a game gets launched, it's a miracle. Every time an academic textbook gets launched, it's a miracle. It's so much work that goes into this. So well done. Congrats to you and Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting timing to kind of be going around writing a book on VR, which I'm sure we'll talk about through the stream.
Yeah, it's exciting. So before we get into the book, we have to do our conflict of interest disclosures, which is a fun term because this is not an institution, but, you know, academics like to make jokes about academic things. We don't have an HR system here. We don't have an institutional review board on this podcast, on this live stream, and on this YouTube show. But we do have two mods that we'd like to thank, which is Debugzelli and Sexaliade Rollo, who are in chat right now. Nifty Chris, our mod, I thought couldn't be here tonight, is also in chat, which is amazing. But let's do instead our conflict of interest disclosure as what I like to call a lore drop. So that involves two questions. The first of which is, do you remember how we met?
I do. We were both brought out to Gothenburg in Sweden for an edited book that some academics are putting together, which ended up being the Dark Play anthology. And I don't have heaps of memories from that, but except the social event, we got taken to a carnival space where they gave us some tickets to kind of go wild with. And I remember you and I really connecting because we were both as competitive as each other, trying to win every single game that we could play. While some of the more, maybe, should we say, maturer academics in the group kind of just watched and laughed at how much we got into those carnival games. So it was kind of at that moment that I knew we were kindred spirits and we'd be friends for the rest of our careers.
Aw, that's so sweet. I was distracted looking behind myself because I'm sure I have a copy of obviously I do have a copy of that book, but I thought it was within arm's reach and evidently it's not. But that is yes, I would like to say that I've changed. I didn't know that I have. I think I've stayed toxic. In fact, Debugzelli got me this really nice sticker for my water bottle that says kindness is meta, which I use as a reminder to not say things like get wrecked. But here we are. Where are you drinking?
Well, it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon here, so I have my coffee.
Yes,
What
that's
are you
right. So
drinking?
I am drinking water, which it's 9 p.m. here, but still. You're based at the University of Sydney. So extra thank you for joining us. Although I guess the time zone difference kind of works in your favor a little bit.
Yeah, this is a lovely time of day to have a chat about a book. Yep.
Yeah, right. But it's really nice that you made the time nevertheless. So tell us what the future's like. How is tomorrow?
Pretty cold, wet, rainy weather, really.
Aw.
But you get to be excited about the weekend, so I recommend it. You should hang around till tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good advice. Solid advice. So let's get into Fantasies of Virtual Reality and the research that got left behind there. And when I read books, regardless of whether they're academic or otherwise, I like to read cover to cover. I read all the notes, I read all the marginalia, I read who you thanked, because I'm really a deeply nosy person and I like to know more about people. So I never skip the intro chapter or the chapter 1, even when it's a short, only 5 pages or so of framing for the book. I'm obsessed with the framing of the book. I love it. It sets the tone. The cold open is incredible. So tell me about that, because the book opens with a comparison of King Xerxes I of Persia and Mark Zuckerberg. How did you and Ben come up with this comparison? It's so good. It's so juicy. I love it so much.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing to understand about, I think, successful academic collaborations is that mine and Ben's at least is underpinned by just talking shit on Discord all day, every day. And so we send each other a lot of just stuff that we find. And I remember at the time that we were kind of having a conversation about how ridiculous it is, how much money Meta spends on its Reality Labs division, which is its kind of R&D division that was pursuing all of the VR research. Just unimaginable. But then we were like, well, you can't spend $12 billion a year and then not have something that is impactful at the end of it. And I had been browsing Wikipedia, as you do, and reading about this bridge that King Xerxes had built in 480 there. A pontoon bridge across the Dardanelles and a canal across the isthmus of Mount Athos. And it just really struck me that what Mark Zuckerberg was doing, using this immense platform power that he has to bring VR into form, was kind of similar. This kind of unchecked boy king trying to change the world. And it didn't really matter that pontoon bridge collapsed a few months later. And it didn't really matter that canal eventually just filled back in and was lost to the ages. Because for at least a little while, the world had to deal with, particularly the ancient Greeks, had to deal with a world in which there was a bridge across the Dardanelles, and the King Xerxes ships could get into Greek waters much easier. So I think it just it captured that parallel. And I talked shit in Discord. Ben said, hey, that would be a good opening to a book. And so I copy pasted the Discord chat, put it in a Word file in a folder titled book, ? And left it there. And then when we came back to read it, writing the book a year later, it just fit. It still captured the story that we wanted to set, the tone of the story that we wanted to tell with this book.
That's amazing. I have so many folders that are book ? That never go anywhere, right?
I have far too many paper ideas. Yeah.
That's why I started this podcast and Twitch stream and YouTube show, is just because I feel like that is a quality of academics, is that we have ideas for books that never go anywhere and we never get any chance to talk about them. So why not talk about them live on Twitch, I guess. So let's talk about VR's struggle more broadly. I really like chapter 2 because it connects nicely to a previous guest we've had on the program. Actually, the first guest ever on the program, your friend and mine, Dr. Jose Zagal, talked about seeing red in the Virtual Boy, the very first episode of the show. So it's a nice tie-in. It's very thematic, but also in general, one of the main takeaway points from that stream was that VR has really struggled. I mean, okay, the Virtual Boy was not technically virtual reality, of course, but it is exemplary of the uphill battle that VR has had and does have and continues to have. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about what's hindering VR's success.
Yeah, so like Sega VR and Nintendo Virtual Boy, all early 1990s products, really failed because of motion sickness. There's technological constraints on computing hardware at the time, resulting in a lot of discomfort. Sega VR was launched at the Consumer Electronics Show, but was never actually released as a consumer product. And someone who was involved in that has told me that it was because Sega's lawyers said, you are opening yourself up to the largest consumer lawsuit of all time, because anyone who used it felt violently sick. We've all probably had that experience. If you tried VR, you've probably felt a little bit nauseous after having used it because of what's called perception proprioception mismatch. So what you see, because of what you see is so convincing, if what you're seeing isn't matching up with what your vestibular system is feeling, so you think you should be being thrown around, but you're not feeling that. The Darwinist reason for feeling that way is that you've eaten some poisonous berries, so you need to vomit. And that's really that mismatch really like limited it back then, and I think also continues to limit it right now. But what I think is really important, and why we really try to, I think it is relevant to start the story with these really like lo-fi prototypes that never even really existed, because it doesn't really matter that Sega VR never existed as a product.
Right.
It doesn't really matter that Virtual Boy didn't really sell that many copies, because the real impact of those precursor technologies is that it solidified this fantasy that we had about what VR technology was and what VR technology meant to gaming, because it was that fantasy, which is what Palmer Luckey picked up in the early 2010s with the Oculus Kickstarter.
Yeah. So I hate to be blunt, but I'm going to be blunt. It's also super sexist, right? One of the struggles I've had with VR for a very long time, including, I don't think it was that trip to Gothenburg, but there was a trip to Gothenburg, or maybe it was Skövde, but it was a trip in Sweden where I tried out a VR driving simulator that was supposed to reduce the amount of fatal motorist cyclists accidents, and I had to go outside and was not violently ill, but felt very ill for about 6 hours afterwards. And the response that I got then and continue to get, and user researchers in chat, our friends who research games in the industry will tell you that motion sickness disproportionately affects women. And your book says, yes, it's literally designed to not take women's eyeballs into account. So sorry, get wrecked. What else does the sticker say? Cry more. Yeah, my toxic gameplay sticker is really coming in handy. Tell me about that. Tell me about the sexist design.
Yeah, so I think there's like the physiology of it. But there's also, I think, the culture, this toxic gamer culture, get wrecked, that comes into it too. So I'll kind of tackle them both. So, and I think a really useful concept to kind of start thinking about this is an idea of the normate body. So a lot of technologies are designed around this socially constructed ideal image of the body. And in the case of gaming technologies in virtual reality, that's your like white, able-bodied Silicon Valley male engineer. Right, so the VR always imagines that the user is able-bodied. So people who we've done research into VR and disability, and which kind of has happened after this book, so it's not a huge theme in the book, but it was definitely kind of informing a lot of the thinking here of people with dwarfism who prefer to use VR, or people who use a wheelchair. If the VR assumes that standing height is around like 5 to 6 foot, the experience of those users who can't use VR at that this idealized sense, they are kind of looking at everybody's crotches in the VR experience, or they're always like sitting at the table as opposed to standing above it. And so just kind of having VR, which is totally virtual, being configured in these really rigid ways, is kind of really problematic. And that really played out, I think, for women who were not involved in the engineering teams building it. And so one of those ways is physiological, right? So just like from a physical fit perspective, VR hardware is really designed for a range of body types, but women are at like the lower end of this body type. And so the really good example of this is the adjustable interpupillary distance, right? So the distance between your eyes. And so research has really found that motion sickness is exacerbated the more that your interpupillary distance is different from what the device is designed for. So a lot of VR headsets have adjustable interpupillary distance so that you can get it as comfortable as possible. But a lot of women find it fall outside of that range. And you're way more likely as a woman to fall outside of that range as a man. And there's even a little graph, I think it was, I can't recall who kind of initially, where the source of this was. I want to give it credit. Upload VR kind of really demonstrated how let's see if I can show you. Oh, is that going to come up? No, it's not. Yeah, the women are up on page 17. You can really see how men are falling right in the middle of what the device is used for, and women are falling like really way outside it. And yeah, so the researchers are really just finding that like interpupillary non-fit is the primary driver of motion sickness. And then there's this other factor from additionally from like this technical effect, that there's two ways in which we perceive depth in the real world. Motion parallax, which is using our binary eyes, we can see things from different angles, and that gives us a sense of depth. Or depth shading, which functions a little bit different. Surprise, surprise, VR uses motion parallax, and motion parallax is the depth perception favored by male bodies. So it's really like quite like fundamental elements of the design of VR favor male bodies. And so as a result, I've done research with, I've probably dropped 1,000, 1,500 students in VR for the very first time.
Oh, wow.
And that's always a really interesting experience, and it really always reminds me that there is something there.
Oh, yeah.
With VR, right? As much as I'm really critical of Mark Zuckerberg and big tech ruining this thing, I think there's actually something really exciting that is being ruined.
Yeah.
And so I always try to come back to those experiences. And I did some surveys. These weren't particularly researchy. These were just about like teaching feedback surveys. But I put a question in around like, did you feel motion sick, and how bad was it? And more women definitely got motion sickness than men, using like a curated set of games that I had picked to not be motion sickness games. One of the things I always found really, really funny analyzing that data was that the difference wasn't, in my sample size, it wasn't particularly, the effect size wasn't particularly large. But what I really saw was that women, I'd asked them to rate how bad the motion sickness was, in addition to the binary of yes, no, did you have motion sickness? Is that women would say yeah, and then they'd score it 6, a 5 or a 6 out of 10. Men, if they had motion sickness, it was always at a 10. And it really comes back to this, I think, this idea that like women, in so many different applications of technologies, women have to kind of tolerate a level of discomfort that men just never ever have to do. So for all of my male students, any little bit of discomfort was 10 out of 10 on the discomfort scale. But I actually think but there's not really a good way to measure objectively outside of that perception how bad discomfort is. And so that's all the like physical kind of physiological reasons why. But if we come back to this like early fantasy of VR that was really that we can really trace back to Sega VR and the Nintendo Virtual Boy, right? This idea of a virtual utopia that you're transported into. It really is a concept that emerged in close proximity to the hardcore gamer identity, right? So hardcore gamers really are trying to really prioritizing graphical realism and replicating the types of games that are really popular in hardcore gaming, right? So fast-paced, difficult, hyper-violent shooters. And those types of games are really bad for all of these problems, because the more fast-paced the VR experience is, the more likely it is that you're going to feel motion sickness. So I think that the way in which the potential for gaming that this technology has been constructed to have also exacerbates these problems further. And if you go back and you look, and you can still Google it, go find the Oculus Kickstarter from 2013, and you'll really see how this idea of the hardcore gamer is really right in the forefront. Like John Carmack who later joined as Oculus's CTO, is right up there as one of the key boosters for this technology. And I think that what Oculus and then later Meta have done is that they've tried to take they've tried to position VR as a solution for the gamer community. And as a result, that brings that gamer community into the VR technology, right? And all of that toxic and harassment and hate alongside that. And then they're acting surprised that the social VR worlds that they then create have that toxicity and harassment in a really pervasive way. So there's the Center for Countering Digital Hate ran a study, and they found that within 5 minutes of entering a Horizon Worlds social virtual reality environment, they'd encounter harassment, racial abuse, misogyny, or homophobia. So, and I think that's a really important part of the way in which VR is like a hostile technology for people who don't meet this idea of the idealized normate body that VR is designed for. Is that it's not just that the hardware isn't built for you, it's that the people who are curating this space have brought in a culture who is unwelcoming and hostile to you. So all of these things kind of converge into really, I think, underplaying the possibilities for what VR as a technology could be.
No, you're spot on. On a happier note, should we look at some red pandas?
Yeah. I think it's a good pivot, and this is the pivot that happens in the book, because I do like VR. I probably haven't put on a VR headset in 12 months, but I have always been excited about VR as a technology. I studied it because I was really interested in it, and I had been working on a project with Zoos of Victoria where we had designed games for the orangutans at Melbourne Zoo to play. And this research project made my career. I got my current role at the University of Sydney because I really think that this is the type of research project that stands out amongst the field of 120 applicants for a tenure track position. Yeah. And that project, went really well, and then I'd learned so much more about zoos, and modern zoos have a conservation mission. They're there to connect you to the animals that are in captivity and help you understand how the natural environment is affecting them and what you can do in real life to support them, right? So in the instance of orangutans, is don't use products with palm oil in, or at least unsustainably sourced palm oil. So I kind of broadly wanted to explore more the opportunities for technology in that context. And so this is how I ended up putting a pretty expensive VR camera inside a red panda enclosure at Melbourne Zoo. And the red pandas were a really amazing case for this research, because most of the day they're about 20 meters up that tree. And so visitors never get to have that intimate encounter with them. And so where they've got this psychological model of understanding and impact of connect, understand, act, people aren't connecting with the red pandas because they're a blob in the tree. But it's also, that's good for the animal's welfare, because being in close proximity to people would be a stressor for that animal. So we put a stereoscopic 180-degree camera inside the red panda enclosure when they were kind of entering it in the morning, and they put a little bit of fruit on the platform that you can see. And this is Misha.
I would die for Misha, just so you know.
Well, so what was really profound for me, because the camera's about 15 centimeters from this fruit, and so the experience of watching this in VR is Misha kind of slowly coming down the tree, tentatively about this new object in the enclosure. But when you're viewing this through a VR headset, that feels like Misha is being tentative about you. And eventually Misha builds up comfort with the presence of this new camera object and starts eating the fruit. And then so you get this beautiful like closeness to that action. And then Misha gets a little bit more comfortable and starts leaning over the platform, sniffing the camera, which feels like to you, you're being sniffed. And suddenly there's this transformation. Instead of watching the red panda at a distance in the zoo where you're safe, and suddenly you notice this is not a herbivore, this is an omnivore, and those are some really, really sharp looking claws. I was really excited about this, and people who I've showed this to literally physically reach out to try and not realizing what they're doing, are reaching out with their hand to try and touch the red panda. You do really feel like you are present with it, and particularly like the young people who do this, it's really memorable. They're really motivated to learn more about the red pandas and consequently the red panda's relationship with its environment. So I think there's a lot of potential for this as a part of the zoo visit, which then has the impact, right, of meaning that we could build zoo enclosures in such a way that Misha is afforded more privacy, because you get that at a distance viewing. Well, so you're like, cool, there's an animal here, and then you get the VR experience, which is like, oh wow, I've really seen them up close now. I've had that special experience that I can't have anywhere else. So we ended up doing like a full-on evaluation of. We kind of made a 5-minute narrative video with the penguins, because there was a big campaign that the zoo was doing about using balloons, using bubbles, not balloons, because of how plastic affects seabirds. And we evaluated that like pretty thoroughly. We've got a journal paper in the Journal of Zoos and Aquariums Research on that one. And the two things that really struck to me from that was this sense of social presence. Like people really, really, really felt like they had met the zookeeper who was narrating and talking to the camera in this video. And despite the fact that this is a linear, non-interactive video, when people described the experience afterwards, they described it as though it was participatory. Now, in this video, you go backstage and you put even the way I'm describing it. In this, the video films the zookeeper putting vitamins inside the fish, and then you go to the animal enclosure, and she feeds the fish, giving them their vitamins as well. And people talk about this as though they had stuffed the fish with vitamins. And when people watched it, they like nod when they're being talked to by the I could tell what part of the video they were in because people were nodding as they were talked to. Right. So I think then, as a result of that, we think that that call to action, use bubbles, not balloons, is much more effective because you feel like you have this one-on-one. You're being asked to do that one-on-one. So I just really feel that like VR is qualitatively different as a medium to 2D film.
Oh, sure.
With so much potential to like entertain and educate, but so often that potential is being overinflated because someone's trying to make money here, or it's kind of the potential is then being applied in ways that end up being really harmful.
Sure, yeah. I mean, first of all, you could never turn me against Misha. Descriptions of her being an omnivore with giant claws, I would risk it. I would risk it for the cuteness. Second of all, you made a really good argument for a use case for virtual reality, right? virtual reality works well when it can help people understand the natural world in a way that would otherwise not be possible, right? Because for animal safety, animal welfare, habitat preservation, right? And as you say, people are very engaged with it. I love the description of people nodding their head when the zookeeper's talking. That's wonderful. But there's some downsides, right? So in chapter 3, chapter 4, you talk about you question or interrogate whether or not VR truly is this empathy machine, a la Chris Milk's 2015 TED Talk. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, and I also want to talk about Barry. Poor Barry. Firing Barry is the worst tech demo I've ever heard of. It's absolutely sinister.
It's such a bizarre example, right? I don't know whether you can pull up a picture of Barry. I just really, his face is. I actually wish I could try firing Barry. I do really want to know what that actually feels like. But yeah, so back in 2015, there's a filmmaker, Chris Milk, who does a TED Talk calling VR the ultimate empathy machine, right? Mm-hmm. And this was really widely regurgitated as this like proven idea, right? Awesome. We can, because we now have this VR technology, we can solve all of the world's problems because we can actually make people care. And so they made a VR film called Clouds Over Sidra, which was showed you the life of Sidra, who was a Syrian refugee in a refugee camp, and it was narrated by Sidra, or a voice actor translating Sidra. And they took that to, I think, Davos, the World Economic Forum, and we're like, look, we can bring the harsh reality of a refugee camp to this place of ultimate privilege and change people's minds and motivate people to do more. And Oculus really got behind this, or Meta really got behind this with the $1 million VR for Good initiative in 2016. But this was also a really great straw man. It's not really a straw man. There's since been a lot of academic writing torn this down, and so that chapter really tries to kind of summarize the various ways in which this is just a deeply flawed idea, right? And I think this is best demonstrated by the video you've got queued up. So we might watch this. So Mark Zuckerberg truly believes in this potential VR for empathy, and he tried to demonstrate this in a live stream on Facebook, showing off Oculus's social VR watching.
Hold on, I did pull up a picture of Barry.
Well, we'll come back to Barry when we get to Barry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
You can get a sense of some of the damage here that the hurricanes have done. And this is one of the things that's really magical about virtual reality is you can get the feeling that you're really in a place, right? I probably should have mentioned this before, but Rachel and I actually aren't even, I think, in the same building in the physical world here.
We're in
but
totally different places.
We're here. It feels like we're in the same place and we're making eye contact. We're talking to each other.
We high five.
Yeah, there you go. High five. So now, this is we're looking around, and it feels like we're
so
really
later on in this video. They go, do you want to leave now? And they go to the moon. So what I think this video really demonstrates is this sense of false proximity and this inherent risk of improper distance, right? So you think you know what it feels like to experience a hurricane and the impacts of it, which is clearly false, right? He's in his office in Menlo Park. But because you think you've experienced it, you think you know what that experience is. And I think that's ultimately really toxic to this idea of what's being tried to achieve here, right? Generate empathy for the people who are going through that experience. You can't actually walk a mile in someone else's shoes. So, he makes this claim, you feel that you're really in a place, but you remain a billionaire who can teleport to the moon. It's not the shared experience. You don't have a shared experience with people who are actually going through that. And I think that who you are when you don the headset really frames that experience. I think the quote is is it Sherry Turkle who says, looking down and seeing breasts will not give males sudden insight into the experience of females. It's like empathy requires this really like imaginative leap. You actually have to cognitively try to engage, try to discard your identity and then adopt the identity of another person, and you've got to collapse that distinction. So VR tries to collapse the distinction. It doesn't try to actually draw our attention to the distinction, and so as a result, this possibility of it as an empathy machine is supremely misleading. Almost certain, like it could be possible if you really tried to highlight someone's real life identity and tear it down and give them this new perspective. But like assuming this is like a given, which is what I think a lot of boosters say, is really just misleading and potentially harmful. And I think like the high five is what really sends me over the edge.
I mean, there's a lot to dislike about this. I think the cold, dead cartoon eyes are one of them. But I mean, the high five is great. I like that the high five is preceded by this conversation of how I don't even know where you are. Like, we're doing this tech demo and I don't even know which building you're in. Presumably you're in the same building, but I would never want to see your flesh. Imagine looking at flesh. Like, what are we doing here, Mark?
Knowing what we know about Mark as a human being, I do wonder if this technology particularly appeals to someone like Mark, right? The distance of it, the lack of nonverbal cues in social VR. I just think that is there something really inherently in him as an individual that is leading to his investments in this technology.
Oh my God, why are they not taking humanities classes? That's all I have to say.
Right.
Yeah.
But which brings us to firing Barry.
Yeah, let's look at Barry.
Let's fire Barry.
Let's pull Barry up. Where'd Barry go? Okay, hold on. I have to, for whatever reason, my computer doesn't want to look at Barry, which is a choice. Let me fix Barry here.
So Barry's an older adult employee, and unfortunately, he's just not been performing. He's not gelling culturally with the rest of the team. And Nifty Chris, I'm going to need you to let Barry go. There
we go. We now have Barry on screen.
Could you look into Barry's eyes and could you let him know this is the end of the road for him with our company? So Barry is a demo from the company Tailspin, using their virtual human technology. And you, as the user, are acting as a HR manager tasked with terminating Barry. And Barry responds based on what you kind of select as your chat choices, either being aggressive or reacting with pleas about the situation that you're putting him into. So the Tailspin CEO, when he was trying to launch this as a real, genuine product, reported that people felt genuine emotional stress when they tried to fire Barry, right? The point being that they were making the argument that the avatar was sufficiently realistic that you felt like you were really firing a real person, and people had sweaty hands, were very uncomfortable, cried, and that they claim that then this really demonstrates the emotional resonance for learning. And actually, I think in your questions, you kind of described this as like a performative LARP, and I think that's a really good way to characterize what this is. That because the LARP is so realistic and we've got a really detailed script, it therefore must work. But I think that ultimately isn't true. And so we really try to frame it in the book as this like managerial class tool, right? There is a fantasy about what this technology can do that serves a particular group of people. It's certainly not the particular group of people that Barry represents, right? That trying to resolve the harm to workers rather than actually resolving the reasons for those harms. And I think VR is very attractive to companies in realms such as sexual harassment training, because and racism and discrimination training, because it absolves you of your past guilt. Because any emerging technology, and I think this will also see this same for AI, when there's like a convergence of AI and virtual human technologies that are going to start coming along, perpetuating a similar fantasy, that the companies will adopt it because it's innovative and exciting, and it absolves them of having done nothing before, because previously we didn't have this new and exciting technology. But look, we're doing something. And then, once it's that we've proven that it doesn't actually work, they'll just move on to the next technology, continually absolved of ever actually having to address the real causes of those harms. And so in that way, I think we can actually think about stuff like this as barriers to real structural change. But, I've read a lot of stuff that Carl Jackson, the CEO of Tailspin, has said and done. And I do want to give one thing that they were doing credit, which I thought was really interesting. So they had a sales training call, so a sales training simulation, so you could try to sell to Barry. And it was sales training. And what they really noticed was they had Barry, you're trying to sell to Barry, but then they also had like a young Asian avatar and middle-aged white woman avatar, right? And so they'd throw you in. And what they were able to actually do is get you selling, and they would show you how your selling changed because of the assumptions that you had about the person that you were selling to. And so they were actually able to, because it is sufficiently realistic, and because we do behave naturalistically, I actually thought that was a really interesting opportunity to really highlight people's unconscious bias.
Sure.
But I imagine that's not a technology that C-suite are paying money for, right? So yeah, we're still not resolving these underlying harms. We're just kind of putting some snake oil over them.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. We have time for 2 more questions, and then you gotta go. I gotta go to bed. I want to end on a. I can't even say it. I was going to make a joke and be like, let's end on a positive note. Let's talk about how Walmart is using virtual reality not only for all the sinister shit we just talked about, but also to assess human productivity, to judge merit for promotion, which is probably the most sinister thing, having humans judged by machines. And one of the things that came through in your book, and we talked about a little bit before the stream started, but it's not just VR, right? Like, in thinking about games in general, we're literally asking machines to judge how we play, and then we make an improvement plan effectively. I mean, you and I do, because we're elite gamers, right, Marcus? Some of the news maybe not, but us.
Metricizes power. And David Beer has this concept of metric power, right? Where our behavior is shaped by the metrics that are produced about us.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that actually is a really useful way to think about what gaming technologies do to us when we're playing them. Mm-hmm. And that like min-maxing that I think we then bring back into our lives. And I actually personally think that min-maxing has really helped me professionally, because I've being able to move through an academic career in a relatively successful way, because I've been able to identify what strategies are effective and what strategies are ineffective by that, right? I'm bringing that World of Warcraft druid-like mentality to my professional life.
You did not play a druid. I don't think you told me that.
No, I was a terrible World of Warcraft player.
Okay.
It's not a good example from EVE Online. So then what Walmart were doing, right, was they would have these VR videos, training simulators, and they were, and the companies that were boosting these, Striver being the main one, were then metricizing your performance in the VR simulation and then so that the lead Walmart managers could use this to remove subjectivity and unconscious bias from hiring and promotion decisions, right? But if we come back to this idea about who VR as a technology is built for, right, and the types of behavior that are going to be encouraged, that are going to be measured and ranked, and the types of behavior that aren't, we see it's not actually removing subjectivity and unconscious bias, it's just shifting it from the manager's decision, the Walmart manager's decision, to the black box of the algorithms that are making these recommendations based on what we just don't know. And I think a good example, one of them is like a deli counter simulator. So, and one of the metrics I think was eye contact with customers as they walk up. And we know that neurodiverse people struggle with eye contact more than your confident Silicon Valley engineer. So I think that's a good example of how but that person's to make a decision based on that is discriminatory. But because it's happening inside that black box, potentially really harmful, and really comes back to this idea of who is this technology for. It's not for empowering employees to become more effective at their job. It's for managers to alleviate them of the stress and harm of having to make promotion decisions, and avoiding legal liability around of bias and so on. So it's really, I think that really underpins all of the analyses of these different fantasies that we identify that people have about virtual reality, because each one of them serves managerial billionaire classes.
Yep.
And I think in calling that out allows us to imagine the possibility for virtual reality as a technology that serves everybody in a positive way.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that is one of the strongest takeaway points of the book, right? Is that these are choices, right, that are being made that impact us. And maybe we need to start paying more attention to the choices being made on our behalf. I'm going to squeeze in one small, I think it's a tiny question, but I am deeply curious about copyright permissions. So the front cover of the book, it comes from NASA. This is a NASA image of... Yep. I've forgotten the, here we go, of Sally Rosenthal. There we go.
This was fun. So firstly, NASA images are all in the public domain.
I didn't know that. Yay!
So you can use any NASA image in your book without permission. But these photos are circulated, and I was interested in learning more about it. And so I wanted to make sure I was correctly attributing which VR headset this was. So I ended up tracking down the photographer, a guy called Wade Sisler, who worked at the Ames Research Laboratory, where they were doing work with the NASA Vive VR headset. And he told me, so he told me the story. So Sally Rosenthal was actually a NASA scientist. She's not a model. She's someone who worked in computer graphics in the 80s and 90s. And he described how the photographer's Wade Sisler's girlfriend had come with him to the photo shoot that day, and she had brought a hairbrush. He hadn't brought a hairbrush, and she stepped in and made sure that Sally's hair was looking as brilliant as it does in some of the photos of this photo shoot. And so I find it really, I love this because I think it really captures the same fantasy that we have about virtual reality today. So back in the 1980s, when they were working on this technology at NASA, you could take the exact same photo of the Quest 3, Valve's new headset, and you would construct the image in the same way. That this person is transported to somewhere else, working on something that you and I cannot see, but they can. I really wanted to kind of make sure that we, and situate, it's not a new technology,
right?
And every time that everybody tries to reset with technologies, is an effort to try and force other people to have to restart the critical conversation about it. But let's not. We know that there are these harms. Let's not try to pretend this is something new, and we have to re-uncover those harms.
Right.
The harms are still there.
Yep, they're always there. All right. So the last question which is the name of the podcast. Tell us about the research that got left behind in fantasies of virtual reality.
Yeah, so it's probably two things. So firstly, we developed the proposal in late 2020, submitted it in mid 2021, and then in October 2021, Mark Zuckerberg rebranded Facebook to Meta.
Oh no!
Right, fundamentally redefining all the popular discourses about VR. And I was on parental leave at this time as well. I was very annoyed at Mark personally, who had chosen to do it at that exact moment, because I wasn't available to kind of jump on all the media around it. But our initial decision was to really resist this hype. And Ben and I both felt, Ben drew in this idea of metaverse is this floating signifier, because metaverse has no common shared meaning. If you pull back the curtain on all the hype in investing, it's just an empty room.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think the same is for AI, right? If you pull back the curtain on all this hype and investment, it's either an empty room or it's a room with 100,000 monkeys typing. And we just thought that if we focused on this speculative, if we made the book about the metaverse, we would be critiquing this thing that's a constantly moving target. The metaverse is everything and nothing. It's platforms for play, it's fashion, it's our whole lives being lived out digitally, it's digital twins. It could be anything. We're actually skipping over the present harms of the VR worker, the Walmart worker today, being forced to don a VR headset to make a decision about whether or not they should get a promotion. The other thing that we didn't bring in is a prominent fantasy with virtual reality technologies, which is pornography.
Oh, sure.
We didn't feel kind of intellectually equipped, right, to try to pornography studies is a really significant body of research, and I think in order to kind of do that properly as two kind of white dudes from Australia, we just didn't feel like our take was going to be the take that was really valuable. I'd really love to see more people bringing it in, because I think if we come back to these, what I talk about in the zoo, right, where it's social presence, real feeling of social presence with someone, physical immersion, cognitive immersion. I think I understand why a lot of lonely people are drawn to the kind of sim girlfriend VR experiences. And as we're now seeing with the prolific availability of that kind of dynamic in ChatGPT technologies, LLM technologies, I think once we see the convergence between virtual reality and those feelings of social presence, physical presence, and the effective interactions that are afforded by LLMs, I think you have a technology that I think people are really going to build maladapted dependencies on. That really also just skips over a lot of I think the harms of particularly the violent pornography games that are on Steam and through Patreon for some reason hosts a lot of them. So yeah, that was research left behind, but I think it's something that if I was trying to find a topic as a grad student, would be rich ground to really open people's eyes to a lot of the crazy stuff that is being built around there. And I think there's also something underpinning a lot of VR conversations, which is, the pornography is often the leading reason people uptake new technology. And so I think porn has been given a lot of space to develop as a companion technology to virtual reality today.
Yeah, I mean, okay, grad students, you heard it here first. There you go. There's your research topic. I completely agree. That's super important. Well, we are at the 1 hour mark, so sadly it is time for us to say goodbye to the stream and each other. Please join me once again in saying thank you so much to Dr. Marcus Carter for his time, his patience, and his research. Applause, applause, applause. Do you have anything you would like to plug? Any new publications on the horizon, or any work?
Yeah, the stuff I'm working on at the moment is around monetization of children in the digital games industry. So we're really trying to bring this critical approach to Roblox.
Yeah. Where can listeners find you on social media or otherwise?
In chat, thank you, Nifty Chris. That's my Blue Sky. Oh no, that's my Twitch. I do have a Blue Sky, but please feel free to reach out on email if this triggered anything. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I expected you to say at the Red Panda enclosure. It's the only place you can find me. Okay, thank you so much to Shawn, Pierre, and Adrianna Poindexter for the creation and use of the theme song, to Sexali de Rolo and Debug Zelly and Nifty Chris, our Twitch mods, for all their classroom management, and to you, the viewers and listeners. Without you, this production would not be possible. Listeners, viewers, chatters, if you like this stream, this VOD, this podcast, make sure you are following with your notifications on, so that you know when we'll be live again and when the next recording goes up. If you're listening after the fact, you can head on over to twitch.tv/professor_Ashley and follow live to catch the next stream. You can also find me on almost all social media platforms as professor_Ashley. The Research Left Behind just started its second season, but we're going to be taking a little bit of a hiatus because, as North American listeners know, Thanksgiving and then all the winter holidays put a wrench in plans. So we will be live again January 25th, and this is actually going to be a Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, because our next guest is based in Spain. So Victor Navarro Ramesel will be on to talk about his book Zen and Slow Games, which comes out on the 20th of January from MIT Press. So we're catching him 5 days after his book launches, which is going to be super exciting. So if you're not already on Discord, make sure you're following us there so you can keep up with the show, the program, and when we will be live next. Good night, everyone, and we will see you on January 25th.